Welcome back. War and Pandemic, Friday, July 3rd, the year of our Lord 2020, episode 264 of War and Pandemic here on America's Voice. Later on Newsmax TV, the John Fredericks Radio Network, blown through the CCP's firewall in China thanks to G News and GTV, subtitled in Mandarin. We had an excellent first hour of the show. If you missed it, make sure you go back, check it out. We're on all the podcast platforms. I recommend watching the live stream as well. The America's Voice guys, along with the producers here, do such a great job of making sure we've got the clips up and all the B-roll, excellent B-roll footage. Jack Posobiec was there from Mount Rushmore. And we have a very special guest on this hour as well. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here on Capitol Hill. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, I really welcome our next guest, who's a very special individual, a real warrior, not just for the Trump movement, but for the American people and people throughout the world. We have on the phone Dr. Peter Navarro, the Assistant to the President for Manufacturing. But Dr. Navarro is joining us today to talk about Hydroxy. Dr. Navarro, you've actually mentioned we had Jack Maxey on in the first hour, Dave Ramaswamy, going through this study that came out of, it was in the Journal of Infectious Disease, a peer-reviewed journal that came out from the great institution in Detroit. But you actually say there's another study that kind of validates some other issues around this. Can you talk about why you have an interest, how you got involved, and walk us through what the reality of this is?
Sure, Steve, and great to be on your show, which is just killing it out there, and you've got a great audience. So let me speak directly to your people here. I got involved in this whole pandemic issue simply because I was the tip of the spear mobilizing our manufacturing capacity through the Defense Production Act in order to make sure we have the swabs for testing, the ventilators for people in the ICU, and medicines like hydroxychloroquine. And through that experience, I was able to distribute at one point tens of millions of doses of hydroxychloroquine into 14 different hot zones at the height of the pandemic: Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, etc. And to my dismay, we had a series of studies come out which were deeply flawed, that the fake news media then in turn used to create what I call hydroxy hysteria, which is an undue fear of a medicine which has been used for decades. And what I saw at the front lines were two things happen. One is all that medicine that was distributed from FEMA to the people of America, the demand just dried up literally overnight, and at the same time, hospital systems like Detroit began to have a hard time finding patients to conduct the randomized blind clinical studies that we need to ultimately determine without fail the safety and efficacy of the drug. So that's kind of how I got in this. But yesterday should be, I'm not sure it will be, but it should be the biggest turning point for the use of hydroxychloroquine that we've seen since this whole debate began. Let's be honest with each other. The minute that President Donald J. Trump said that hydroxychloroquine had possible safety and efficacy for preventative use as well as for therapeutic use, the mainstream media has just hammered him and the drug relentlessly. And here's the poster child for that. Yesterday, this major study comes out, and there was only one news outlet that covered it. And the New York Times passed, the Washington Post passed, I think the Wall Street Journal passed, and the results are amazing. It's 2,600 observations, shows a 51% reduction in the mortality rate if you use hydroxychloroquine for early treatment. Now let me talk a little bit about the science of hydroxy and why this study is so path-breaking. The reason why hydroxychloroquine is hypothesized to work is it has two things, a blocking effect and an alkalinity effect to kill the virus. The blocking effect is basically the desugaring of your what they call your ACE2 receptors, which are on the outsides of your cells. And when you desugar them, it makes it harder for that coronavirus to penetrate the cell. And then if the virus penetrates the cell, what hydroxychloroquine also does is increase the pH, mildly acidic to mildly alkaline. That stops or slows down the replication of the virus. So you can see that from a preventative use effect, people who take the stuff for lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, or if you just take it because you don't want to be infected with the China virus, you have this blocking effect help you as well as the alkalinity effect. But here's the key point about the Detroit study. This medicine shows the best promise of working in early treatment, which is the first 7 days of the infection. First 7 days, you start with a fever, you start with a dry cough, you start with fatigue, but at that point, your lungs are still intact and the virus hasn't really contaminated the other organs of your body. And if you move past that into the next 7 days, the 8 days to 14 days, what happens is you lose 3 to 5 nodes of your lungs to the disease, your organs begin to degrade, and at that point the medicine won't work. So here's the point. The previous studies which have shown that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work or could harm you are basically late treatment studies. There wasn't enough sophistication amongst the scientific community to distinguish between early treatment and late treatment. What the Detroit hospital system did, through the genius of Dr. William O'Neill, who runs that system, is understand that early treatment was critical. So what they did was the nanosecond a patient would come in the emergency room, they would set in motion the process of administering hydroxychloroquine. So over 80% of the patients got hydroxy within the first 24 hours, and over 90% got it by the first 48 hours. And that's the key. Yeah, go ahead.
Peter, just reiterate for the audience, the results of it. The results of it were what? If you got it when you went into this study, what were the percentage of lives that were saved?
You had a 51% reduction in the mortality rate. It went from 26% mortality rate for people with no hydroxy. In other words, 1 out of every 4 died. And then it goes down to 13%. Now, if you just scale that up, Steve, just scale that up. I mean, we're over 120,000 Americans who have died already from the disease. We're heading towards 150,000 in the next month or so. If you administer, what this study says, that if these study results hold, it means that this drug could have saved tens of thousands of lives already and has the potential to save literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people worldwide if it's used in early treatment, which is to say, the minute you get symptoms, you take it. Now, just disclaimer here, talk to your physician, right? Because there are some contraindications for it. But look, lupus patients, rheumatoid arthritis patients, malaria, been used for decades and decades. This study, Steve, also found no adverse effects, okay? 50% reduction in mortality, no adverse effects. New York Times won't even print a story about it. Now, you go look in the archives of the New York Times, right? And you can see them trumpeting all these bad studies, the Lancet study that got discredited, the VA study that was a joke, the Brazil study, which by design was meant to kill people. But a study like this comes out, truly path-breaking, and the gray lady, the Washington Post, won't even cover the news. I mean, this is like, these people hate Donald J. Trump more than they love saving lives of American people. It's blood on their hands, to paraphrase one of the text messages I got from a doctor yesterday after he saw the study. Blood on their hands.
Peter, I want to be very specific here. The big controversy at first was about heart disease and people that had heart problems. What did this study from Ford Medical up under Dr. O'Neill that was in a peer-reviewed journal, and we'll talk about that in a second, what did it say about people with heart conditions?
The important thing here, Steve, and this is why it's so important for people who want to take hydroxychloroquine to have the discussion with your doctor, right? There are some people with heart conditions where this drug is contraindicated, and those would be screened out by the Detroit hospital system, right? But that's a very small percentage of people. So that's what the study said. It said that if you give it to people where there's no contraindication, what they found was you got a 50% reduction in the mortality rate, half as many people die, and there's no adverse effects. Nobody dies from the drug. The only thing that happens is the drug saves lives. I mean, I can't overemphasize just how groundbreaking this study is. It's not the random, blind clinical study that's the, quote, gold standard, but we can't wait for that in this crisis. And, you know, the next shoe that's got to drop here is that I think the FDA really has to revisit these decisions that it made over the last several months, which effectively killed hydroxy demand and also has made it very, very difficult to conduct the kind of additional clinical trials we need, not just for therapeutic, but also for prophylaxis. And, look, this stuff costs $11 for the whole treatment cycle, Steve. $11. You know how much remdesivir is priced at now? They got it over $3,000. And when I was originally looking at this back in February, the price was only $2,000. Plus, you got to use remdesivir in a hospital setting intravenously for like 10 days straight. Hydroxychloroquine, you can take it at home. So there's something going on here, and I want to reemphasize, these people hate Donald J. Trump more than they care about saving lives, and it's blood on the hands of these journalists who have romanticized these bad studies, and now, today, it's the dog that didn't bark.
Steve, 45 seconds.
You don't see people reporting on this. It's unbelievable.
Peter, can we keep you for the next segment? We've got more questions asked about this, about peer-reviewed journal and prophylactics. So Peter Navarro is going to stick with us. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. We want to hear all your comments in the live chat, Raheem. Make sure people are commenting. We've got questions for Dr. Navarro. We're going to talk to him about when he comes back, what a peer-reviewed journal, why it's important it's in there, the Mount Sinai study, also about this being a prophylactic in that study, and also some additional questions to Dr. Navarro on the CCP virus, a concept that he made very famous last week. The CCP lied, Americans died.
We'll be back.
Raheem,
more War Room Pandemic
with Dr. Navarro
in just 1 second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Live from Capitol Hill, War Room Pandemic, episode 264. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, and Greg Mans here in the studio. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Look, in turbulent times, entrepreneurs need all the tools they can use, and the best tool you can have is the software package, NetSuite by Oracle. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon, and get your 7 action steps every entrepreneur needs to take during these turbulent times. Well, it's during these times that America starts to look to one of President Trump's right-hand people, and that would be Dr. Peter Navarro. He's head of manufacturing policy, a direct report, assistant to the president, has been on the campaign, is really somebody who's been fighting for economic nationalism for many, many decades. You know, what's very important is Dr. Navarro was the leader of this whole defense production bill to really get American manufacturing in back of moving the supply chains and these medical products, medical technologies, the PPE, the ventilators, all back here in the United States, and make sure that they were there to support the governors who really have the responsibility to kind of manage the process with the mayors and the county supervisors execute. Dr. Navarro, I want to go back to these studies. You're a PhD from Harvard, not a medical doctor. You're the first to admit that. You're a social science doctor. But I want to talk about, so the audience gets a clear sense, and really the media gets a sense. This was in a peer-reviewed journal. This wasn't an opinion piece written by Dr. O'Neill in the Wall Street Journal. It wasn't an opinion piece written by you in the Washington Post or Dr. Hatfield in the Hill newspaper. This came from a peer-reviewed journal. Why is that important in this case?
The bad studies that have gotten out there and been pimped by the likes of the New York Times and the Washington Post have tended to be bulletin board, non-peer-reviewed on boards like MedRIX. And peer review simply means that a study comes into a journal and it's refereed or reviewed by scientists to judge whether or not it's a well-executed study. And so this study that's just come out from the Detroit hospital system appears in a prestigious journal, the Journal of Infectious Diseases. It was peer-reviewed, and I've looked at carefully, not as a medical doctor, but as a statistician and econometrician, and it's tight. It's good. I mean, it's got high statistical significance. The findings are compelling, and there's interestingly enough, there's a second study that just broke from the Mount Sinai hospital system with more than 6,000 observations in it, and their conclusion is a lower mortality rate with patients on hydroxychloroquine as well. So in the space of 24 hours, you have two of the largest hospital systems coming out with studies that say hydroxychloroquine saves lives. And so what we have now is a situation where there's a phenomenon I call hydroxy hysteria. And it's this unfounded fear of using a medicine that's been safely used for more than 6 decades. It's because this hydroxy hysteria has come about because of the politicization of science, because of people who hate Donald Trump more than they care about science and saving lives. And we've not just seen it in the mainstream media, the newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post that have glorified these bad studies. We've also seen it in the medical community. I mean, the journal, I think the poster child for this is The Lancet. Once one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world. It's run by an editor now who literally has written editorials calling for the defeat of Donald Trump in the election. The man was totally embarrassed by the publication of a study which never should have been published, but which had to be retracted. But it did its damage. The mainstream media, again, glorified that study, which said that hydroxy could harm you when the study was just totally fake. So here's where we stand. We've got 2 studies in a 24-hour period that show that hydroxychloroquine can possibly save lives in a significant way at a time when cases are rising, and we've got over 60 million doses of hydroxychloroquine gathering dust in the FEMA Strategic National Stockpile. We've got a media which refuses today to cover what is arguably the best study to date on the benefits of hydroxychloroquine. and people are dying. So there is blood on the hands of every journalist who refuses to cover this story and get this message out. And I'm glad that War Room Pandemic, which is always ahead of the curve, skating to where the puck's going to be, is right on this story today.
One last thing before we move to a new topic, the CCP virus. I want to talk to you about the prophylactic part of the Detroit study. It seemed like the media had a pretty big impact, and people actually, I think they mentioned, and Jack Maxey said one of the buried leads in here, they had difficulty getting the study going because they couldn't get enough participants at a certain point in time because people were intimidated by the media coverage. Do you think these two studies, Dr. Navarro, and other things you hear may be coming out, you think that gets us past that all Americans can pull together and realize this is just not about President Trump? He's trying to work for the best interests of the nation, and particularly the 125,000 people we lost, and they're talking about maybe potentially 100,000 more, that we've got to pull together for our country and look at every potential therapeutics. And I know you've been very focused with your group on prophylactics, on things you can get ahead of the curve and not have to wait till you get sick. I think it's one of the most disturbing things that came out of this study, that it's running late because of the media hysteria. Do you think now, Dr. Navarro, we could be past that?
I don't know, Steve. And if we're not, and if we don't get past it, if we can't punch through, people are going to die because of it. If this study's right, it just means that every day we waste, people are going to die. Now, I think the next thing that's got to happen is that there has to be somebody out there who makes a request to the FDA, because this is how the process works, for an emergency use authorization again for hydroxychloroquine. And it has to be quite specific, Steve. It's got to be, we want to be able to use hydroxychloroquine in early treatment in a hospital setting, and also with outpatient use, doctor to patient in outpatient use, and for possible prophylaxis. That's what the FDA needs to be considering in the wake of these two studies. Because I can tell you that unless the FDA acts, it's not going to be possible for this hydroxychloroquine to be used. It just simply won't. I won't be able to work with FEMA to send this out to anywhere where it could get to hospitals for any use. And that's what's got to change. But in order for that to happen, the mainstream media has got to rise above itself and look at these studies and quit politicizing this. I mean, people are dying because of the fake news. And on this, they have been they're totally willing to publish the Brazil study. I mean, go to Mr. Google and Google that. It's like, oh, people die. Well, yeah, they gave him 3 times the dose. They gave him a lethal dose. Anyway, lest I digress, your show's going to have a lot to do with moving this.
I want to pivot now to the CCP virus. But last thing, just as a recommendation, if you can tell your colleague, I know you think very highly of Dr. Fauci, just ask him if his subscription to the Journal of Infectious Diseases has run out. Can you make sure somebody in your office runs a copy of the new one over to him, so that he only heads the Brooks only heads infectious diseases for NIH. Just seriously, War Room Pandemic for Dr. Fauci's subscription to be updated.
Yeah, well, I'll just say one thing. On January 28th, I was warning of a pandemic, and the president was pulling down flights from China, and Dr. Fauci was telling America that everything was going to be just fine. So, just saying. But look, the CCP lied. Americans died. I think it's so important to really recognize what the Chinese Communist Party has done to this country and is doing to this country. We've got Americans angry about an economic lockdown. We have them anxious about their economic future. We have them fearful about catching this Chinese Communist Party virus. And what has happened because of that virus? We're at war with one another. This is a house divided right now. And we need to understand that even as we work our way through these differences we might be having on domestic soil, this began with an attack on America by the Chinese Communist Party. And even as we speak, they're using social media and all other things to wage information warfare against us. And we've got to rise to this occasion here as Americans. As I said on Maria Bartiromo, it's like I'd love to see some protest signs that say CCP lied, Americans died, and I think I might have seen some this week. And that's a good sign, but we need to see a whole lot more.
30 seconds, Steve.
Can we keep you for a few minutes? We just want to talk to you about Hong Kong and some other issues, if you can just hang with us for a few more minutes after our break. Raheem, why don't you take us out? Dr. Peter Navarro will hopefully be able to stay through for a few more minutes. We know he's busy. But Raheem, why don't you take us out, and we'll return with Dr. Navarro.
We want all your comments, hashtag War Room Pandemic, in all the live chats. Make sure you're sharing the show and leaving us a review. We'll be right back.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. Greg Mans, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here on Capitol Hill. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
In turbulent times, entrepreneurs are going to lead us through this to the other side. If you're an entrepreneur, you need every tool in your toolbox. The best tool you can get is a software package that pulls everything together. That's NetSuite by Oracle. Remember, Oracle's the number one platform on the cloud, and NetSuite's the number one software package for entrepreneurs. Now in over 20,000 businesses, whether your business is $1 million in revenue or $100 million in revenue, NetSuite by Oracle is the tool you need. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon today to get 7 action steps every entrepreneur should be taking during these turbulent times. One of the individuals that's made this less turbulent for the United States, for the citizens of this country, and actually for people throughout the world is Dr. Peter Navarro. He now joins us. Dr. Navarro, you had a meme, I think it was last Sunday, on Maria Bartiromo, I think also maybe on Jake Tapper later in the day. You said the CCP virus. You said the CCP lied and Americans died. That was picked up by a group of expatriate Chinese this week. They actually demonstrated outside of the Chinese embassy and then went down to the White House to show the support for President Trump and particularly for you of what you're doing. A lot of those people were members of the new federal state of China, which is kind of a government in exile. But as importantly, they were American citizens, Chinese Americans, Chinese expatriates. What did you mean? Every person we saw at that rally, both at the Chinese embassy and then later at the White House, were saying how they were inspired by your term. It's the first time anybody's really called out specifically the Chinese Communist Party. So 2 things. What inspired you to say it? And what do you mean by that? What do you mean it's the CCP's virus? Because you're the first guy to explain about this kind of chain of title of their decision. So I'd like to, for all the people, the new federal state, all the people that were out there that you're a hero of, what do you mean when you say the CCP lied and Americans died?
Let's walk through the timeline. Chinese Communist Party, November, biological weapons lab in Wuhan province or a wet market or somewhere in between, that virus was spawned by the CCP. They hid the virus through December and January and into early February from the rest of the world. The CCP did it behind the shield of the World Health Organization and by exerting pressure on Tedros, their puppet, at the World Health Organization. During that time, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, vacuumed up all of the personal protective gear around the world, including over 2 billion N95 masks. Talk about blood on their hands. When the doctors and nurses at the front lines in Milan and New York and elsewhere didn't have enough PPE, that was the CCP. And then finally, we're in a situation now where they put hundreds of thousands of Chinese nationals on aircraft to fly around the world in international travel at the same time that they locked down travel within China. In other words, they didn't let their own people go around from Wuhan and go and infect people in Beijing or Shanghai or anywhere else, but they damn well sent people here to America by the hundreds of thousands. So if that's not the CCP lying and Americans dying, I don't know what it is. That was an attack on American sovereignty. That was an attack on the American people. And you can debate whether or not the Chinese Communist Party intentionally designed that virus and intentionally let it into the population. But what you cannot debate is the fact that the Chinese Communist Party hid the virus, vacuumed up the PPE, and sent Chinese nationals around the world to seed and spread that virus. And even as we speak, they're using social media in an information warfare setting to pimp the authoritarian model of Chinese communism as a better way of handling the virus. They want Donald Trump to lose this election. They want Beijing Joe Biden to win this election, and they're coming at us hard. China lied, the CCP lied, Americans died, and I'd love to see those signs propagate faster than this virus all around this country. And we've got to stop warring with each other and see who the real enemy is here.
Dr. Navarro, hang on for a second. You know, what's so amazing is this week with what happened in Hong Kong with the national security law, the first people that went to the streets were Chinese Americans or Chinese nationals that are here as part of some sort of asylum program, that they were inspired by what you said, because they say, hey, look, it's really the first time anybody in the world's called out who the villain is, and they know that about how they've been oppressed. Let's talk about Hong Kong for a second. The people we see in Hong Kong, the people on the streets, the citizens of Hong Kong, and you know this as a Harvard-trained economist, that this was the third greatest capital market in the world in back of Wall Street and the city of London. And here you have Chinese citizens in the United States protesting at the Chinese embassy, showing a new flag of this new federal state outside the White House. They clean up everything. They're very polite. They're giving water to the police officers. But what they can't understand is, here's the question we get. Why is it that you see people in the House of Representatives passing unanimous bills, you see the Senate pass unanimous bills, but Wall Street and corporate America are against any pushback on Hong Kong and what's happening by the CCP really just taking absolutely totalitarian dictatorship control of Hong Kong? If Chinese citizens can see this, if citizens of Hong Kong can see this, if asylum seekers here from China can see this, why do you think that Wall Street and corporate America can't see what the CCP is doing in really 1938, Czechoslovakia? This is the Munich moment. Why do they continue to fight you, President Trump, even the House of Representatives, Senator Cotton? Why are they fighting you guys every day on this?
Two reasons, Steve. One is Wall Street makes a ton of money offshoring American jobs, particularly American manufacturing jobs, to China. It's all about the bottom line. It's all about that house in the Hamptons. They don't really care about what's happening in Ohio or Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania. It's all about the Hamptons and Palm Beach. And the second thing is Wall Street also wants to go and sell all their financial services and all of that stuff in China. So it's all about not ruffling the feathers of the Chinese Communist Party. And here's what I fear. The Chinese Communist Party has a long history. I've written about this in my book, Crouching Tiger. There's a whole chapter in there on how, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Chinese Communist Party invaded India and was able to take Aksai Chin as territory because everybody was too distracted around the world with the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think we've got a problem now. I mean, if the Chinese Communist Party were doing to Hong Kong what they were doing right now, and we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, the world would be on fire against them. But instead, we're fighting amongst each other, and we're distracted by a huge distraction, admittedly, but I think that's part of the problem here. But we need, as a nation, to understand that the root of all evil here, in terms of this virus, is the Chinese Communist Party. We've got to stop fighting amongst each other, and we've got to understand what's coming at us, and we've got to defend ourselves. That's critical.
One of the things, Peter, I want to bring up before, I know we got to let you go, but one of the things I want to bring up is that these decent, hardworking people that were in the streets this week at the Chinese embassy and at the White House, one of the things they asked is, why is the mainstream media, these powerful organs in the United States, why are they not continually focused on what the Chinese Communist Party is actually doing? And a couple of people brought up, I think it was Jake Tapper, when you were on the show, he says, oh yeah, we investigate, I've been trying to investigate the Chinese Communist Party and get these guys on here for interviews. Look, the ambassador to the United States, where the new federal state basically had the new flag right outside and they were calling the police on him, he's available. Why do you think the mainstream media, and particularly a guy like Jake Tapper, seems to avoid mentioning that this is the CCP virus? They keep avoiding the fact that this came out of China, and it came out of because the chain of title of decisions of the Chinese Communist Party.
Here's the playbook, Steve. The Democratic Party, Joe Biden, New York Times, Washington Post, MSDNC playbook, okay? It's blame Donald J. Trump for everything bad that's going on right now, particularly the Chinese Communist Party virus. And if any blame is assigned where it should be to the Chinese Communist Party, that somehow helps Donald J. Trump. It's the same thing with hydroxychloroquine, right? It's like, we can't let him be right about hydroxychloroquine. That would make him look good, like he's leading on this pandemic. So they go the other way. And by the way, just to correct the record, the Wall Street Journal did come out with an article. So you've got two outlets, CNN and the Wall Street Journal, actually doing articles about this path-breaking Detroit study. New York Times, no. Washington Post, no. And the beat goes on.
Last question. I know you got to jump. This week we had Chinese citizens, Chinese Americans, asylum seekers, refugees from China outside the embassy and at the White House in this display of CCP lied, Americans died. What do you think it's going to take for a broader range of American citizens that kind of understand the message that this is the CCP virus? What do you think it's going to take, Dr. Navarro?
I think we've got to just keep pointing to the fact that this virus came from China, and we also have to take actions. I mean, Congress needs to pass some bills here. It's all talk. There's no walk yet. I mean, why shouldn't we hold China accountable for the trillions of dollars of damage they've done to this country? They put like over 30 million people out of work. We need to have people understand who's responsible and hold the Chinese Communist Party. We need to have that discussion. And to the extent that the media keeps focusing on calling it the coronavirus or COVID-19 rather than what it is, the CCP virus, refusing to talk about China's culpability in this, it's really, it's just at a historic time in this country. It's doing the worst possible thing. The media, I see them in the worst possible light. And the microcosm for me today, Steve, is the fact that a groundbreaking, path-breaking study comes out, shows hydroxychloroquine can save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives worldwide, and it's crickets at the New York Times and the Washington Post. Crickets.
Listen, I know you got to go, but I want to say one last thing. This week, these demonstrations were a combination of Lao Beijing, old 100 names, and the deplorables. And I got to tell you, President Trump, Mike Pompeo, and Dr. Peter Navarro, we heard those names over and over again of the guys that are real heroes to these people. So, Dr. Navarro, I know sometimes it seems like every day's a dark day at the White House. But you got to know you're touching a lot of people, and you're touching them not just in the head, you're touching them in the heart.
We got to bounce here. Thank you
There's no
to
dark
Dr.
days
Peter
in the White
Navarro.
House. We're fighting the good fight, Steve.
Thank you to Dr. Navarro. Thanks, Stephen K. Bannon. We'll be back with more War Room Pandemic in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room here on Friday, July 3rd, the year of our Lord 2020. Greg Mans, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here in studio. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, tomorrow we're going to be playing the highlight reel of the president's historic trip to Mount Rushmore and his speech tonight and all the activities, the fireworks display. That'll be tomorrow on America's Voice.news. They're out there actually with a crew today to catch it all live, but if it's past your bedtime, you get to see it tomorrow. And if you just love it so much, want to see it again, you get to see it tomorrow. You know, I want to thank Dr. Navarro for taking time out of his busy schedule to update us on Hydroxy and also what's going on with the CCP virus. You know, he inspired so many of these people from the new federal state and from the whistleblower movement to really go to the streets and for the first time reiterate that the Chinese Communist Party has to answer. They have to answer, and they have to be held accountable for what they've done here. I think it's very inspiring that those folks could see Peter Navarro on a TV show and pick up the chant and really take it to the next level. I think you're going to see a lot of activity in that regard. Dr. Navarro, though, brought up something very about the insidious nature of the Chinese Communist Party and how they look for opportunities. Our guest is Dave Ramaswamy. I want to bring you back. He's our mathematician on the pandemic, but he's also a scholar and knows a lot about Indian history, the history of military history. Dave, he mentioned, Dr. Navarro mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis as a time when China tried to, the CCP tried to move on India last time. We've got another border skirmish. Not do we have activity in the South China Sea around Taiwan, this huge move on Hong Kong, and obviously more suppression of average Chinese citizens, but they're also up in what I think could lead to much more than a border skirmish on the borders of India, Tibet, and China. Can you update us on what's going on there?
You know, Steve, thanks again for having me. I mean, Dr. Navarro dropped a lot of truth bombs, and my takeaway was, overall, let's put aside ideology and focus on biology. Let's get all the Americans who are out of work back to work. Let's get them early therapeutics, and let's get our economy up and humming. As to the CCP virus, you know, he's absolutely right. The CCP lied, Americans died, the rest of the world died. And what the CCP is doing in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, against Japan, against India, is to create a huge, you know, head fake, a distraction from their complicity. And what I would call you have in murder cases the concept of, you know, willful manslaughter or willful murder. What the CCP has done is willful genocide. I mean, they have needlessly harmed tens of thousands of people and killed thousands of people more. So we gotta hold them to account. And the new Hong Kong security law is an absolute outrage and disgrace. I mean, if it were a Tom Clancy novel, it would be the dim sum of all fears. So Dr. Navarro is absolutely right. The world's focus and attention is distracted because of the CCP virus. If not, the entire world would rise up and speak up in unison about what the CCP is doing to their neighbors, expansionism, revisionist history, and all around just complicity and genocide and manslaughter.
Raheem, jump in. You and Jack jump in here. Raheem, I understand that Boris Johnson's increasing, you know, the number of passports for Hong Kong citizens. But to Dave Ramaswamy's point, this is so outrageous. And you see the thousands they've been arresting. If you hold up that sign, CCP lied, Americans died, or CCP's the enemy against humanity, which is another one of the signs, you go to prison right away, no due process. Why is the British government, who really, you know, got into this debacle, right, was lied to, was misrepresented, why is the British government not standing up more for the freedom of the people of Hong Kong?
Well, Steve, I mean, the obvious stands, and we've talked about it on the show before, the British government's interactions with big Chinese corporates, CCP-owned corporates in China like Huawei. You obviously had the nuclear reactor situation some years back under David Cameron. David Cameron, also the former prime minister, enriching himself at the hands of the CCP also. And yesterday, one of the stories that we broke on the National Pulse showed that actual top former officials from Theresa May's government, that is the last Conservative prime minister before Boris Johnson and bled into Boris Johnson's cabinet as well, are advising Carrie Lam, the puppet of the CCP in Hong Kong. This firm Consulum has just been given a $7 million contract until the end of the year, and the firm is staffed with people from the British government, from the British Parliament, people who worked for members of Parliament, members of the European Parliament, and you go through a list of who's who on Consulum's board and who's working for the CCP in Hong Kong now. And that's the answer to your question. On the one hand, you have the compromised government in terms of how long it's been working with the CCP, and you have compromised people who have just come out of government themselves who are now doing the PR effort for Hong Kong and for Carrie Lam.
Raheem, is BBC or any of the Times of London, the Financial Times, is anybody focused in British media on calling this the CCP virus? Is anybody over there, any politician, saying that the Chinese Communist Party has to be held accountable for what they've done to the Chinese people in this virus, what they've done to the rest of the world? Is any British politician standing up?
Well, it's not all negative. Of course, Nigel Farage has been talking about this for some months now, not in any kind of leading position, but he is in a leading position in terms of shaping the national narrative in the United Kingdom on this. He is one of the most subscribed to politicians in the country and has been making some headway on this. You're starting to see some shifts amongst the Conservative Party backbenchers, in particular Tom Tugendhat on the Foreign Affairs Committee and a couple of other MPs who are coming around to the idea that A, something has to be done, B, we have been complicit in this with the CCP, frankly, as time has passed, and C, that the Chinese Communist Party really is the National Socialist Party of Germany of our time. So I'm not going to be entirely negative about it. There are moves being made. Steve, we've got about 45 seconds left here.
Yeah, tomorrow I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the folks at AVN for doing the live stream out of Mount Rushmore tonight. It's going to be a big night of activities for President Trump and the country. Tomorrow you're going to see a recut of Dr. Navarro's interview with us, and then followed by a highlight reel from tonight's activities at Mount Rushmore. We want to thank AVN of all of our distribution partners for doing this.
War Room Pandemic will return on Monday, but make sure you're tuned in tomorrow for all the activities that take place late tonight there at Mount Rushmore. And for everybody out there celebrating, as much as it pains me to say it, have a very happy Independence Day.